Hi, Simon.
Hey, Lisa, how's it going?
It's going well. So yesterday, did I tell you that I went to a networking event,
No, tell me.
like lunch? Yeah.
Okay,
It was for demand generation marketers. Our good friend Mimi had forwarded the invitation to me. She didn't go, but she invited me on behalf
nice.
of whoever conducted it. And
Right,
so, for people that don't know, these are things where it's usually sponsored by some marketing services or tech or something, and then they invite you, they try to woo you and try to get you to
right.
buy into whatever
No,
that they have.
no such thing as a free lunch, right?
Although, it's funny, I don't know, I managed to get out of there unscathed without anything. And I left with, I got headshots taken, and they also gave us like wireless phone chargers.
Oh,
I know.
fancy.
I know. So it just was
Okay,
my time. And the lunch was really good. It was at this hotel. But anyway, we had, it was a panel. And so while you're
yeah,
eating, they have panelists. There's a moderator that's asking questions of the panelists. And we had, again, they're marketing people, but they're like everybody had kind of a different role. So one person was responsible for, I think it was more of like the technical side at Lenovo.
hmm,
Another one was demand gen for Uber. Another one worked for ServiceNow. And then there was another one who she works for a marketing agency called Ignite.
okay,
And then Activate was the sponsor, which is I think they do like, I don't even know, B2B stuff.
okay.
And then their moderator was also from a marketing agency. And so they'd ask questions here and there. And I'm bringing this up because I thought that the topics that we covered were pretty interesting. And the first topic is probably less relevant to our audience. It's more of like if you're in a corporate environment. It talked about sales and marketing alignment, which is a thing.
Hmm.
It's a problem if you, as you
Yeah, it
know, like,
is.
yeah,
Well, yeah. And you and I both worked for a company that they split sales and marketing, and it was a bit of a challenge. Yeah.
yeah, can be. And then the second topic, though, which I think might be good for us to drill down on a little bit more, is about marketing attribution.
Okay.
And that might not be something that a word that many people have heard of. They know what attribution, like I'm attributing something, but what does it mean in the context of marketing? But I thought that we could just kind of open up a discussion, you and I, about our experience with applying
Yeah.
attribution, what it is, all that.
Yeah, I, I mean, one of the questions I would ask is, did they talk about sort of the fundamentals of attribution, things that you should be doing or not doing, and how did they sort of break it down?
No, no. And again, it's very informal. It's just like asking panelists. And then there were probably, I think they said there was 70 people in the audience, which I was
Okay.
surprised, but that seemed about right. It was within
Hmm.
a event room at a hotel. Food was very good, by the way. So I'll tell you about it later. um, and the audience was fairly seasoned marketers. So I don't think we needed to break it down a little bit more, but the discussion, well, let me stop there because I think you and I should talk about that. And then I want to tell you a little bit more about what surprised me about the discussion in that
Yeah,
context.
I mean, I think when I hear attribution, the first thing that pops in my head is that small businesses don't often know where people come from, right? That's a form of attribution. Like, how are you getting prospects or customers, right? So I think hopefully they touched on some things you should be doing. I also think, attribution has a role when it comes to figuring out your target audience. It's essentially a way to sort of test that whoever you're marketing to is the right audience, right?
How
Would
so?
you say? Well,
I
okay,
don't know.
so yeah,
Like I
I
think of
mean,
it, I don't think of it as that. I think of it as people can have different goals. And even in one company, they might have several different goals. And if you look at a huge company like Adobe, where we both have worked in the past, they have enterprise customers, they have creative customers, they
sure,
have whatever. So they have all these different audiences that they serve. So they could have different goals depending on what product or service they're trying to sell. So the creative one, it's literally probably a sale. Whereas on the enterprise side, maybe it's somebody that signs up for a webinar, and that is that's a goal, because then it gets people into the sales pipeline or something like that. So you can have different goals, and then working back to whatever that goal was, and then all the touch points that you did along the way that led to that conversion or that goal. That's the way I
Yeah.
look at it.
No, I totally agree. But I think in a really simple way, if you're sending out emails to people and you're not tracking an email person clicking open and clicking a link and then clicking to your website and then performing that conversion or whatever that goal is, if you don't have that connective tissue, that's attribution. And what I meant is, if I do a marketing campaign and have email, and I know that email drives a certain customers, and maybe it's about the topic too that's in the email, right? There's more interest in a certain kind of email versus another kind, maybe marketing versus like helpful tips. I don't know, it's
I
like,
see what you're getting at. And it's,
because
I think the word audience is what was throwing me off a little bit, because
okay,
that's more like you and I have talked about, this is my target audience, and that's like a
right,
whole thing. But all right, let me just back up a little bit. Let's just literally talk about attribution. So it doesn't just usually, a sale doesn't usually happen when a person sees one thing and then they immediately buy it. Sometimes it
sure,
does, might be an impulse purchase, but it usually requires a ton of different things, and it requires, but everything's different. So it could be the right combination is I serve ads on Facebook that then pulls people in, then they sign up for something, then I send them an email, then something else happens, they go to a webinar, I retarget them with, I don't know, then they search on something and then they buy. So there's like a million different things that they do. And the Uber guy actually said that he pointed out that there was 200 touch points, like on average or something, for they're trying to promote more the B2B side. So
yeah.
going into enterprises.
Why don't you quickly define touch point?
Oh yeah, good point. So all of those different, if look at it as a view of the customer or the prospect, and what were all of the different exposures that they got? I guess that's a better way to say it. But it's not just channel, because let's say it's in channel being like email, search, display, social, because you could have the same Facebook ad, for example, and the same person sees that 4 times. Those are 4 different touches, but it might be one
Sure.
channel and it might be one ad, but it's 4 different touches.
Touches,
so
but a single touch point would be
exactly.
that
It's a
Facebook
moment.
ad, right?
Yes. Served at this time in this geography, because maybe that same person, I don't know, went someplace else, and I don't know if that's even, I don't know, I'm getting a little bit complicated there, but it's like it's all at every single little, and then there's attributes, not to be confused with attribution, which is time of day, what is the copy, what is the size of the ad, what are some other things that you can think of? Like there's literally like thousands of attributes that can go into all of these different touch points.
Right. But when we talk attribution, the sort of goal is to understand the mix of those touch points that ultimately result in a conversion, something positive, yep. Right? You're not yep. really going to measure all the different other things that they do that don't result in a conversion, for example, right?
Not true. So, okay. And you do measure that. And so keeping it simple, they see, again, one ad, another thing. Let's say they see 3 things and then they convert. And you can look at things where you analyze all of every touch point that led to the conversion. Now, some of those people, they saw things that didn't lead to the conversion. And you know that by looking at this is a path that a prospect saw and they didn't buy within a certain period of time. So if you see a lot of that, then you might say, you know what, everybody that saw this ad, they didn't convert. So we're going to cut that out. So it actually
Mm-hmm.
helps by measuring. You measure everything or you tag everything, and then over time you can start to analyze, this is actually not effective, and in fact it might be hurting us. So we're going to cut it out, save some budget probably as well, and then maybe that will lead to a conversion where
And
it might have been hurting us.
right. I mean, I would say what you just described, though, is a pretty large scale, medium business.
True.
You're spending
True.
money in a lot of places. I think that when I think about this, people think, oh, it's really complicated attribution. I have to buy a tool. I'll have to use something. But the answer is, if you said it, if you start tagging things, right?
Yeah.
I think a tagging strategy, it's not only obviously important for your just general measurement and analytics, but that's the same elements, the same tool set that you use to understand attribution, right? And
Do you want to talk about tags real quick? Little sidebar tags.
Sure. Any link that typically goes back to a website, you can tag it with attributions or variables. The standard format's called UTM, right? Universal Tag Manager. It's a format that I think Google probably came up with, and pretty much everybody uses. You'll click on a link in an email and you'll see this long string of different items with question marks and equal signs and things like that. And those are all different kinds of tags. And typically you have sort of 3 buckets of tags, right? You have a campaign, you have a asset, something that defines what the particular source or what we call medium is. And then there might be a creative, which is, I confused it there by saying asset, but the idea is that you can understand, oh, this click came from this email. They clicked on this particular link and that was this creative or something. There's a way, you can sort of matrix it out. That's the most basic. Again, if you're a small business, even if you're using sort of a free or low cost email platform, if you have analytics on your website, which you absolutely should, you can include these tags or these codes with every link. You can do the same thing in social, right? You can tag things. Now, different social platforms have different tags as well. And why don't, talk a little bit about maybe Facebook or Instagram, the tagging, they have built-in reporting for some of this information. Like, how does that factor into the whole attribution?
Exactly. And you know what? I think I want to put in the show notes a couple of things. There's a UTM generator that, again, it's a free thing, and all it does is append a bunch of characters after your website. So yourdomain.com / what is it? UTM question mark equals or something like that, and then it's a bunch of stuff after that, and then whatever it is. So but I can put in I'll put in a link in our
content equals category equals, depending on
source, medium, whatever. Right. You can make anything up. You figure it out pretty quickly once you see what the format is. It's you can do it on your own. You can't
completely make it up. There are some standards to those bucket names if you want things to fall in the right spot.
True.
So
but once you figure it out, you don't need a tool to generate it. But once you start to get familiar with it, you can just how to how to create
friendly tip, even in the biggest companies, there's been a shared spreadsheet of UTM codes floating around, because somewhere you need to have like a ledger or a glossary of every UTM that you've had floating out there, because you're like, what is this? Sometimes they're very cryptic.
Exactly. And okay, so let's say we've tagged everything, and then what does this matter? That's the other thing. And maybe you asked me a question. Did you ask me a question that I need to answer before I kind of move on? I don't know.
It was sort of the question was sort of at the end there. It was like, how does all of this tagging then, how do we get back to
come
attribution,
into play? Right. Okay. Now I have to mention another tool that is free, and it's called Google Tag Manager. And I mention this because Facebook, Google, whatever, you can create tracking, but if you don't have this code on your site for the two things to talk to each other, you're not able to kind of measure things as effectively. And Google Tag Manager is a nice tool because it has a bunch of things built in where you're like, I need to create a tag, and then it's like, here's a Facebook one, and then you're like, oh, okay, and it ask for your like account number or something like that. You can connect it very easily. And then let's say you're not running Facebook ads anymore, and you're like, I don't want Facebook to know my stuff. So you can go into Google Tag Manager and shut it off. Versus if you put it on your website, sometimes you have to find a developer or somebody knows that where it is. You have to figure out where is it, and then it's just a nightmare. So Google Tag Manager is much easier.
And to be clear, these are not the UTM codes. No. These are the pixels or cookies, basically, that get set. So we're going a little deep here for folks, but let's step up a second and say, I'm going to tag my email. I'm doing very basic Instagram. I'm doing Facebook, promotions. I'm linking to my website or to a landing page, right? So all of those things are tagged. Now, tell me more about attribution, because I know that there's things people have to understand are like first touch, last touch.
Yep. Let's talk about that. So this is a philosophical discussion where in the old days, it was a linear thing of like, somebody saw this, then they saw this, then they saw this, then they saw this, then they saw this. So is the first thing that they saw the most important thing? Because if they didn't see that first thing, it wouldn't have led to them doing everything else. But maybe it was the last thing that they did. That was the thing that they did right before they actually pulled the trigger to purchase something. Yeah. So it's like, so there's discussions around that, which is the most important. So then it started to go, well, okay, well, they're both important. So we're going to just split the credit across both of those. Now, I realize now that I said that out loud, if you've got 5 different things, keeping it simple, 5 different touch points across the way, but again, it's probably hundreds. If 5, you would say, you don't say, okay, I had Facebook and Google and email and blah, 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 blah. Facebook gets 1 credit and Google gets 1 credit and email gets 1 credit. That would mean there's 3 conversions, which is not the case. So this is where it's fractional attribution. So every touch point, or either the first one or the last one or a little bit of both, all of it gets divided up to ultimately equal 1. It's 1 conversion. So this, I want to just sidebar. I think we have this should be like sidebar marketing is what our podcast should be called. In the old days, or people that are less familiar, they would look and say, oh, Google did really well, or oh, Facebook did really well. And they would look at it independently, and literally they're counting twice. And so you think, oh, I've got all these conversions. How come it doesn't seem like it adds up? And that's because you're counting twice or 3 times in some cases. So this concept of attribution has done away with that. It's like, you see, it's 1 conversion, it's 1 person that did this thing, and you break it up across, the touch points. Now, first touch is literally giving 100% of credit to that first touch point that led to the conversion. Last touch is giving 100% credit to the last thing. There's something also that's called time decay, where it's the most recent thing that somebody saw gets more credit than the previous one, than the previous one, than the previous one. So it kind of goes down from there. There's a W shape where you say 33% gets first one, everything in the middle, you kind of divide up, and then last touch gets 33% as well. So these are all very, they're just like, you decide, this is what I think. So this is where it gets philosophical. Now, I don't recommend people going out and buying a hundreds of thousands of dollars solution unless you are in a large company that can
And
afford
spending
this.
a lot of money.
And spending a lot of
On your
money on
advertising.
advertising.
Yeah.
Good point. This
Yeah.
is not worth it. But where I mentioned that it's just as important to see what didn't work as what did work, that's where algorithmic attribution is what it's called. It's literally doing like tons of tests of various combinations and looking at all of your customer data and saying, these are the things that led to conversions. And so it does the math of people that saw that didn't convert, that's worth nothing. And so it'll do all that math for you. Now, it's expensive. Now, the good news is Google now does not even have in Google Analytics, there is a free version of Google Analytics that most small businesses, I know that in one of our past companies, might as well just say it. So we went, one of our companies, we had the free version for a while. We were a small startup, and then we eventually started paying for it. And there's some benefits for that. But for a small business, free version is perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. And with that, once you've tagged everything correctly, you've set up these UTM codes, and you've got Google Analytics tracking your website, Google Analytics can help you. It only does algorithmic attribution now, which is shocking. It's a pretty sophisticated thing, but they're like, this is the proper way to do it. Right. And so you can kind of do it. It also requires a bit of setup, but that's for another topic.
What would you say though? Okay, so now I have all this data. How do I use it? Like, how do I am I looking for the happiest path, or am I trying to say that, you know what, as a form of investment, or how I'm going to invest my strategy, investment of time, resources, money as far as ad spend. Do I look at it and say, you know what, every single person who visits an Instagram is a great converter, even if they touch a bunch of other points? Or or do I say, you know what, social is great, but if it doesn't include an email, then they don't convert. So are those the sorts of
you can do it in a number of ways. So there's, I would say, at the kind of channel level. So you talked about, social, email. You can see, you can look at past performance at the channel level to see what's contributing to your conversions. And you can start to play around with, okay, I need to put more resources towards this because I do see that's converting better. Or, not that you're like, I'm going to lay off my social person because that's not doing anything. It's like there is a time and a place for also just awareness and brand. That was actually a topic at the networking event yesterday, is like brand versus demand gen, because everybody's like demand gen, because you can demand generation for, that's what is driving sales. But if you don't have awareness campaigns also, then that's a little bit tricky, because then if people will take a call from, Dell, Lenovo, but they haven't heard of, a name that they can't pronounce, so they're not going to take your call. So if you have awareness of your brand, that's going to be open doors for you as well.
Right.
I just got a little bit off topic.
No, but I think that, I was a thought that immediately came to mind as you were sort of going there is like, should you pick like maybe 2 to 3 things, instead of 200 touch points, you have 2 to 3 key points, and then start by measuring that? Or do you think there's a magic number, again?
No. Yeah. So I threw out this 200 thing, and that's like, it's not even like, oh, I would aspire to have that. That doesn't matter. I think you have to know what's best for your business. And I do want us to talk another time about the like lower, no cost marketing tips or platforms, whatnot, that people can use. Like we've even mentioned a couple today. But from that, I lost my train of thought. Cut this out.
That's all right. It happens. No, I was just asking you about is there a magic number? And is there...
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. So it depends on your business. And then, because you might start with social, you might do emails, because those are something that you can do yourself. Even Google Ads, like you're like, I'm gonna spend, $20 a day or something like that. So it's whatever's right for you. And then I think within that, you will start to identify how to make each of those channels a little bit better based on the performance. You can start to test. I do think that with ads, it's a little bit, it's encouraged to have a bunch of different headlines and images and whatever, because then it can learn more.
So again, it's sort of just like anything in marketing, just like our logo, there's a mix of things going on here. One is, it sounds like you're saying, if you start producing emails or you start producing social ads or whatever, you need to measure those independently and just know that
Yes,
these things are being opened or clicked or viewed, or the subject is one that someone's interested to click through and go deeper on. But then so that's sort of basic, right? And then there's let's get a little more sophisticated and figure out, okay, if I mix email and social into the same experience, whether or not it happens linearly, or
yep,
it's more like a vortex.
yep,
If then that if my social ad doesn't immediately convert, this is just a potential strategy, right? I see my social ad will convert, but if it converts better with email, I could say, if someone doesn't immediately buy my socially advertised product or whatever, maybe then my second CTA is always, it's
call
sort
to
of like
action.
not ready, call to action. Sorry. We should know that by now. Is give an email and we'll keep you updated, right? Kind of thing. And it starts. So it's really saying, okay, email has a role, and email plus a social ad is really powerful. It's a plus, right?
Yep.
Each alone will convert, but you might do better by mixing a certain way. And that's what
Yep.
attribution tells you.
And I want to mention also that we've talked about this notion of, it's basically the customer journey, which we've talked about in other episodes, where literally that's it. Like somebody saw something, maybe they didn't even think they needed whatever it is you sell, and then they saw something and they're like, oh, and then they start thinking about it. And we've talked about the funnel, we've talked about the journey that somebody goes through. Similarly, you can, when you look at attribution, everything is leading to that last step. However,
Right.
what were the openers? You can start to look at, well, what were the first things that these people saw? And so then you could start to emphasize your the awareness part of your strategy to be aligned with more how you're seeing the performance, which it depends on if you have a problem where you're like, we're just not getting a lot of sales. Well, is it a problem at the end where you're not saying the right thing to get them? Or is it a problem at the beginning where you're not getting enough people that are
Right.
kind of qualified? And so it does give you some levers to start to look at. I mean, I love this kind of
Again,
stuff, and
all this
hopefully it's
stuff
not
works
too
together,
much.
right?
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
you've talked about a journey. Now we're talking about funnel and awareness and
Yeah.
consideration. And it all has to work together. And these are different tools and techniques that you might apply at different times, right? Again,
Yep.
it's a sophistication level. I would say, sort of as we close, I implore you to make sure you track stuff even at the most basic level. How many website visitors are you getting? Which pages are getting traffic? Which pages drive conversion? And conversion, again, for different kinds of businesses might just be a lead so that you pick up the phone and have a sales call, but it might actually
Yep.
be e-commerce, or you sell through a third party. But you want to understand that, right? If you don't understand that, then the rest of this isn't going to matter, right? This sophisticated sort of thing that we just discussed, the attribution models.
So let's recap. What's the first
All
thing you
right.
do? Get Google Analytics, I
Get
think.
Google Analytics. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's free. There's a free basic.
Yep. Get a Google Tag Manager account to manage all
Right.
of your
Pixels,
It's
tags.
pixels. Yeah.
Yeah, from all your different channels like social media, your email provider probably has it, things like that.
Yeah,
And
and
third?
just well, before we move to that, like let's make sure
Oh,
that this is super clear because the tags that you're using with Google Tag Manager are specifically you do it once for like Facebook or Google or whatever. It'll appear on your website so that Facebook or Google or whoever know that a person that saw your ad or whatever went to your website. So that's how it knows. It kind of ties those things together.
right.
Third is the putting UTM. It's appending a UTM code on the end of your URL for your destination.
So what do you recommend? You said earlier UTM code
There's a
generator
generate
free.
and yeah, I mean I think if you do a Google search, I think Google has one. I'm sure there's tons of them, but we can put that in the show notes as well, just so people have something they can access. Again, free.
Sure.
And then I guess after that, once you've done that and you've run some campaigns for a while, you'll use Google Analytics to see how the performance is. And Google will do, it uses the algorithmic attribution now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's it. So if anybody has any questions, like we should open it up, let people comment on if they have questions,
Yeah.
we can answer them because this is
Ask the host
it's a
and we'll be happy to answer.
meaty topic.
It is.
From tangents to tactics, it's mostly marketing.
It's mostly marketing.
It's mostly marketing.